everyone. This is the Buttercup Podcast where we talk about early childhood topics. My name is Marisa Macy, and I'm the host of the Buttercup Podcast. Today I'm super excited because I have Dr. Iheoma Iruka, who is joining us today, and she's a research professor in the Department of Public Policy, and she's a fellow at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute in North Carolina. And she's the founding director of the Equity Research Action Coalition at Frank Porter Graham at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Iruka is leading projects and initiatives focused on ensuring that minoritized children and children from low-income households, especially Black children, are thriving through the intersection of anti-bias, anti-racist, culturally grounded research, program, and policy. Some focus areas include family engagement and support, quality rating and improvement systems, and early care and education system and programs. Dr. Iruka serves on numerous national and local boards and committees, including the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and the American Psychological Association's Board of Educational Affairs, Brady Education Foundation, and Trust for Learning. In addition to being on the National Advisory Committee for the U.S. Census Bureau, Dr. Iruka is a Census Advisor for the National Urban League. Dr. Iruka is the recipient of the 2022 American Psychological Association Mid-Career Award for Outstanding Contributions to Benefit Children, Youth, and Families. Congratulations, that is so awesome.
Thank you.
She has a BA in Psychology from Temple University, an MA in Psychology from Boston University, and an MS and Ph.D. in Applied Developmental Psychology from the University of Miami in Florida. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be talking with you today, Marisa.
I'm so excited to talk to you. And Dr. Iruka, can you talk about how you got started in the education field?
Yeah, I feel like by accident. I mean, I wouldn't say it that way, but really, I feel like I bumped into it. But really what happened is, I got, if you read my bio, I went to school really for psychology, right? Like I really was leaning into really trying to understand mechanisms, what helps children learn, right? Like what ensures that children have the best start in life. So I really was just focusing on, what are the mechanisms, the opportunities for a healthy growth and development. That was really what I wanted to do. And I say that in sort of in a facetious way that I bumped into it, but it's really because my PhD mentor, Dr. Darrell Greenfield at the University of Miami, he did a lot of work with Head Start. And even when I did my dissertation, I still did things around family efficacy and family engagement. I don't think I was really doing early childhood, but I think that exposure to really Head Start, the Head Start program, and then obviously the literature behind the origination of Head Start, I think that really started it. And then after I did my PhD and went to Westat, a research firm, for about 9 months, I ended up doing a postdoc at Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute, best known for the Carolina Abecedarian study that talks and deals with early childhood intervention. And I think between my PhD and my postdoc, I think that really set me on a journey, really the discovery of the importance of the early years, the discovery of really the potential power of early child education, the workforce, and also the system. So I feel like I bumped into it, but maybe also bumped into me. And so that's really how the journey started.
That is so neat. And your mentor, Dr. Darrell Greenfield, has done so many interesting studies with mathematics and early childhood education. And that's such a great foundation and all the neat things that you did at the beginning of your career. And I have students who watch this, and what I love to be able to show them through interviewing amazing people like you is there's so many exciting ways you can make a career in early childhood education. And can you talk a little bit about your passion right now and some of the things you're doing? Because, I mean, you are on fire, Dr.
No, I love it. I mean, I would say, to the students, I would say the one thing I tell even my own students is that, be who you are, right? Like embrace the opportunity, embrace the mistakes, embrace your own journey. So I think that for me is foremost. And so I'm founder director of the Equity Research Action Coalition. And I would say that our work really is in kind of 3 big buckets. One is really around sort of the interrogation of early child research and evaluation, right? So really making sure that we sort of think about how does racism and issues of bias and inequities, like what does that mean for our early child research? But also doing original research. Like for example, I'm get to do a whole new research around what is African-centered education? Like what does that mean when you're trying to do education for and by Black children and families? So I'm even doing new research that really begins to be culturally grounded, particularly for Black children. So that's like one stream of work. The other stream of work is really around policies, right? I was not trained as a policy analyst, but of course, my journey has taken me everywhere, including to Nebraska and back to North Carolina. But one of the areas that we're really attending to is what policies, whether local policies or federal policies, really address rooted inequities, right? Like what is going to really address, say, the achievement gap or wealth gap, or even all the different inequitable access to early child education, the workforce compensation, inequitable accountability system. So what policies are going to really be equitable? So really trying to identify those and look at innovations that's happening across many local spaces and states. And of course, the federal government. And then the last part that I feel like I really lean into and I'm very excited about, to your original question, Marissa, is really around the sort of the communication driver and translation. Like, I mean, you know how a lot of us get trained to say, what are your research implication and practice implication? And to me, I feel like I didn't really get schooled in that. Only when I really came out of PhD and postdoc and lived a little bit that I now understood that we can do great work. But if it's not reaching the community, the advocates, the leaders, the sort of bureaucrats, the policymakers in ways that they can hear it, receive it, and use it, I don't want to say that the stuff we do is useless, but it may be harder to impact, to really effectuate the change we want. And so one of the areas that I really hone in on is the communication drivers. How do we translate things, right? How do we use from all the social media platforms to the communications to town hall meetings? How do we translate our information for it to be useful in many, many spaces? But then also, how do we make sure that our new generation of scholars understand the power of words, good and bad words, right? The power of narratives that really shapes how you view people. So I would say there's a lot that I'm so humbled and excited that I'm doing, but they really are in those three buckets of sort of interrogation of research and doing new research, equitable policies, and translation and communication and mentorship, right? Like to me, I am just so appreciative to be able to wake up every day and be able to do something in those spaces.
Yes, that is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And your work is so exciting. And one of the things that I love that you've done recently with your colleagues and part of your team is the contextual measure that you all created. Can you talk a little bit about your new assessment?
Yeah, so this called Access, which stands for Assessing Classroom Sociocultural Equity Scale. And the lead author really is Dr. Stephanie Carrington, who is at Boston University. Should definitely check her out. But really, what we wanted to do, right? So one of the things that, you know, we and both of us are obviously in the early childhood, early education space, and we understand the power of the classroom environment, right? Whether it's the structural part of it or the process, right? Particularly the student child, the teacher child interactions. And we really are just obviously we stand on the shoulders of many, and we recognize that, you know, tools like the Eckers, that was the early child environment rating scale that was here made here in North Carolina at FPG, was one of those. And we know the classroom assessment scoring system, also known as the class at UVA, those are two of our pinnacle measures, at least measuring quality in early childhood. And while we thought that they were good, you know, general tools, we really thought that they did not really address issues of really social cultural equity, right? Like how is equity really being addressed, particularly for racially minoritized learners, particularly Black children, Latino children, other children who may come from marginalized sort of communities or households. And so our tool really is trying to sort of capture, like I would say, five big things. One is really around the notion of challenging the status quo knowledge, right? The issue is how much are we making sure that the interactions happening really begins to center other sort of knowledge. Oftentimes, knowledge about Black people or Black children may not be centered in the curricula, but how is that happening, right? So are we able to see that? The second thing is, are there equitable learning opportunities, right? Do children from different marginalized groups or minoritized groups, do they get to also engage in the learning, whether it's with, are they able to see the books, the materials, really be included in a really deep, authentic way into the learning engagement step, right? We're looking at to what extent are sort of equitable discipline, right? We have this huge, obviously, crisis really around the exclusionary policies and practices where children are being basically thrown out of the classroom, right? Whether in a very explicit way or even implicit way by not just engaging, right? So looking at discipline and how that's operating, but also looking at, are there sort of connections to children's home life, right? We know that so much of children in the early years, that connection between the home and the school is so critical. But how much is that visible, right? Is it about conversations happening about what happened when you were on vacation, or what happened, last night, right, with your family, etc. So how we connect in those two really important contexts. And then finally is we talk about personalized learn opportunities, right? To what extent are teachers really understanding that minoritized learners are living in an ecosystem where they are not made visible, where they're not viewed as excellent, where they're not viewed as really brilliant. And so, to what extent are the learning opportunities really personalized and recognize the sort of ecosystem that they operate in based on your gender, based on your race, based on your family background? To what extent are we personalizing learning in ways that are deep, authentic, but also create that love, trust, and relationship between teachers and children, but also children and their peers?
Thank you, Dr. Iruka. That's a well said, wonderful, eloquent description. And what what I want to know is for implementation, like you talked a lot about translational research, and this is a great example of how you and Dr. Currington created this measure that can be used in programs and early childhood classrooms to really look at and examine practices of inclusion and the environment, uh, and create potential and possibility for inclusion for all children. What what are some strategies for being able to use ACEs in programs and in classrooms?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And that's really so it was really built with intentionality, that is not just a research tool, right? That is a tool to provide a new lens for educators, right? Like Access was developed to say, and it's called Access. So people, so like you said, is inclusive, right? So that children who are often left behind are fully included in all aspects of the learning, right? From the curriculum to the conversations, et cetera. Like they're thought of as part of this learn environment. And so the tool, part of it is that we want, when we would sort of do the summary, we want to really make sure that teachers understand, educators understand that there are biases that we all live with. There are sort of inequities in our cultural sort of system that we live with. And so we want to give them that lens to understand that you have to do some specialized sort of interactions with children who come from particular backgrounds. And so we give them a lens in that summary, but we also show them, are there great things that you're doing, right? If you're doing a great job with sort of, your discipline practices, that's really equitable, that's really provides human dignity for kids, we want to make that clear. If there are things that you're doing around homeschool connection, we want to make that clear, right? So we're trying to make sure that the summary is actually able to give teachers a lens, because in the end of it, we're not in the classroom, right? Like we're just gonna, take a video of your classroom, say about 4 cycles, 15 minute, 4 minute, 4 cycles of 15 minutes. So that's about 60 minutes, right? So we only see a segment of your classroom and the interactions. There may be things that we miss. And so what we're hoping to do that is really helps to open up a different lens for educators, for coaches, or even for the administrators, right? Because in the end of it, if you've been taught a certain way, you're always going to stick to that way unless somebody helps you to kind of give you a different pair of glasses. And so Access tries to provide that with the tool, but also with all the summaries, and also to say, how could you X, Y, and Z be able to implement more of equitable sort of learning opportunities in your classroom? How can you make your classroom more personalized? So when our book is going to be released, probably within the next few months, and it'll give really some clear examples about how whether you use the tool or not, but you as an educator, as a professional, how can you really engage in what we call equitable learning opportunities? How do you do that in your classroom, in your setting, whatever it may be? And so we do have ways you can do that.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I can't wait to read your book when it comes out. And is Access, am I saying it right?
Yeah,
Access?
access. Yep, that's your access. Yep.
All I can see is the acronym
Yes.
ACSES.
Yes.
So it's
Yes. I
pronounced
know.
access, not
Yes, that's
aces.
correct. No,
Sorry
no,
about that.
exactly. People do that often, actually. But so you won't be the first. But yes, access. That's correct.
So is Access published now? Can people get it?
So people can get the article, which actually, so there's a couple of articles we've already written on access. If you do, Google or, look at your library for Currington or Iruka, one of our names, it'll pop up. There's at least two or three articles already. You'll actually get a sense of what it measures, how it was validated, the actual items that we're looking at. So you'll get a lot more information. And the forthcoming book will have even more details, obviously, about all of the measurement, how to use it, how to get certified. So we'll have a whole lot of all those details. But just for people who may just be curious about it, there are a lot of articles out there and also a lot of videos that both Stephanie and I have done around access. But happy to also share those for those who may be looking.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll put it in the show notes too, the
But
uh, how to get a hold of it
yeah,
and then once it comes out, so it'll be part of the book.
that's
So
right.
the tool will be in the book, but it's also published in journal articles and other
That's right.
places as well, the items. Well, thank you. I was at a session at the Inclusion Institute last spring, and I went to the session that Dr. Currington did about your access tool, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's so innovative, and it's um, uh, one of a kind, and I think it's really going to transform practices, and will be so cool to have.
That's
Uh,
our hope. So thank you.
yeah, yeah. So, what's been the highlight of your career so far? When I read your intro, you recently
Yeah.
accepted the award through APA, which is a huge accomplishment and such a wonderful honor. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's so great to see you celebrated. But if you
Yeah.
could say, like, what's your favorite thing so far?
Yeah.
What would it
No,
be?
I mean that was definitely was an honor in many ways. I would say probably my favorite thing that has been surprising is the course that I'm teaching. Like I've been at it, like I haven't had a teaching load just because I do so much research and policy and translation work that I just don't have the time. But this semester, I decided to go ahead and take on a class, mixed methods. And for me, even though it takes up like, 3, 4 hours out of my schedule, which is bananas, that has been really a rewarding experience, right? Like I feel like yes, the students like we're learning so much. We just are engaged and all those good accolades and affirmations, great. But it's been so rewarding just to be in those spaces and to know that my experience, good, and I tell them the good and bad and the ugly, right? About my own experience as a researcher, as a scholar, and what are some of the good things that I say, take this part, don't take this part, like don't take the part of working, 80-hour work week, don't do that, but do take the lessons that I've learned and how to sort of find your voice, do the work that really creates a passion that will create whatever the economics you want for your life. And so for me, that has been really rewarding on many levels. Again, it's we're still in a pandemic, right? You have students who are still dealing with a lot of mental health issues, financial issues, so many other things. And so for me to be able to be in person with them for 3 hours a week and sometimes more, and be able to share with them, both obviously the content of the course, but also to within the content, be able to build in issues around equity, around racism, around inclusion, right? Being able to do that while they're still growing their own career, I think for me has been so rewarding. And I'm just so grateful for them for the lessons that they're teaching me.
That sounds great. And that's for students at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Yeah, this is for our master's in public policy. We started a new master in public policy in MPP this past year, and so I'm teaching the research methods track. So yeah.
Great. Uh, do you have any advice for educators who want to partner with families and be able to serve families the
Yeah.
best way they can?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wrote a book on this one too. So I mean, it's funny, and I did actually, I did it. It's funny, I did it with my mom, who's actually a public school teacher. She retired, a Boston public school teacher. She was a chemistry and biotech teacher, and and I guess I just thought it was so interesting to write the book with her. but we sort of wrote this book. I forget, maybe it was 2014. I can't remember all of it. But really, what I would say, what we left is what called the 4 E's, right? That if you want to really be a great teacher, especially to those who may not look like you, sound like you, live like you, etc., is one, you have to really be open to exploring. Like there's a 4 E's of exploration, education. So like one of them is really explore who your families are, right? Begin to really understand what are your dreams, what are your goals, right? Like what are you trying to actually sort of understand about the family? Recognize that you can't know everything, but there's some things you want to know, not just about the bad stuff, but also some of the good stuff, and how and what is their goal for their child in this year. The other part is really around this sort of expectation, right? Is recognizing that we all have biases, and that's totally fine. But it's like, what kind of expectations do you have, and is it realistic, right? Is it grounded in that family's, custom, their heritage, right? Like, what is it grounded in? And so, what kind of expectations do we have? But it also doesn't mean don't have low expectations. Have expectations, just have them be really realistic, and one that's really grounded on sort of family centered ways of being. The third E is really around education, right? And I don't mean like formal education, but it means like we need to, as an educator, you have so much information, right? You can do a whole, TEDx talk on it. And so how do you inform families about, well, what is this classroom environment you're trying to create? Who are you as an educator? What is your philosophy? How do you like to engage and connect with families? How can they be part of it, et cetera? So really educating families on the schooling system, your classroom, your own education, your background. I think that's really powerful when families can see you for you and not just like, there goes my kid's teacher, right? So you want to be able to do that. And then finally, the other part is really about equipment, right? As a teacher, you're already being asked to do so much, right? You're asked to be the snot blower, you're asked to be the therapist, and everything else in between. And so for me, it's about, can you create an environment that equips families to be advocates for their kids, for other kids, and for you, right? So that means that what kind of, are you creating some sort of peer groups? Or you create some sort of like, maybe if you have if you're a good savvy social media, Facebook group, right? Or you create some sort of like maybe monthly chat with the teacher or chat with the principal or whatever, right? What kind of ways are you equipping families to really be what they are, children's first teacher, right? We say that a lot, but we actually don't do it in real life, right? Like we just say, go, parents, you don't know anything, go home and eat your bonbon, right? But if you equip families with enough information to say, here's what you could be doing to help me, here's how I can help you, and vice versa, we can do better together than alone, right? If you know that I have 2 kids, if you know what my son is going through today, trust me, your life will be easier. The same thing with my daughter. And I think if we just have a little bit of time to really do some of those braiding and those connections, it actually makes your job much easier. It may take a little bit of time up front, but it'll make your life easier. Just like early childhood. If you do enough early on, downstream it'll be so much easier and less expensive and less costly, and et cetera. So the same thing with parent sort of teacher relationship. The more you kind of build that up front, it's so much easier later on.
Yes. And your words better together. So you're 100%. And I love that you wrote that with your mom. I
That's
didn't
it.
know that
That's
that
it.
was your mom.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
so
with my
cool.
mom.
And the
I
four
know.
E's.
The 4 E's, right? The 4 E's: exploration, expectation, education, and equipment, right? And the book had empowerment, and I should know, but I changed it because after talking with a bunch of other families, it was like empowerment felt a little pejorative. And because it's like, we're gonna empower you. Like, no, I have power. I just need you to get out of the way. Right. Like I need to not take over. I need to make sure my voice is heard. And so empowerment felt like we give you permission, whereas equipment is more of, I'm going to help you create the table, create the setting, and really you're going to do what you're going to do anyways.
That is awesome. Thank you. And you were here in Nebraska for a while. You worked at
I
the
was.
Buffett Early Childhood Institute of the
Yes,
University
yes.
of
It's
Nebraska.
amazing. It was amazing.
And we'll have to get you back someday soon. How can listeners follow you?
So luckily, one of my name, I'm probably the only Iheoma U. So you can follow me on Twitter. I know it's true. Like literally, you can literally. People say you can Google me. You literally can't Google me. I'm literally the only Iheoma Iruka. So, but feel free to follow me on Twitter at Iheoma Iruka, which is IHEOMA IRUKA. That's one way, and so you can see me on all the platforms there. You can also check out our website at the Equity Research Action Coalition, which is equity-coalition.org. www.fpg.unc.edu. So, but again, I say Google me. You can then track me literally on all the work that I have done, and with so many others, and just grateful just to be able to talk with you, Marissa, today. And to your students out there, I just say continue to really find your voice, and continue to learn from people like Marissa, like your professor, and really lean into who you are and the best of who you are, and really working on behalf of and with others, particularly those that are marginalized.
Beautiful. Thank you. Be who
Thank
you
you.
are and serve others. And thank you so much for all you do for children and families and our early childhood workforce. And um, just, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. I just thank you so
Thank you.
much for all you do.
Thank you so much, Professor Marissa Macy. It's so good to talk to you. And until then, onward we go.
Onward we go. Thank you, Dr. Iheoma Iruka. Have a great
Thank you.
day.
You too. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.